Hello lovely, today's tutorial we're going to be working on the Emily Top series. This particular episode is going to build onto the shoulder and sleeves using a combination of short rows and also in stitch height differences to create wedge of shaping. If you're not following along with the Emily pattern, you can still use these techniques for your crochet. Okay, so now I've made this one here, and then you would simply work back and forward, always doing your decreases whenever it tells you to on the pattern. If you've got a larger bust or you're a larger size, then you will have to do a couple of decreases like we did on either side of the apex. If you're following along with the Emily pattern, I would recommend keeping the stitch markers in all the way up to the top, even when you've finished the final decrease. And the reason for that is they basically act as a guide to where your neck to your shoulder is. Let me use Tom. So there's the neck, and then human shoulders have like a little sort of straighter part, and then they have the slope of their shoulder, so it's like two different angles here. And when we are making our neckline, our v-neck neckline, we don't want to add extra height onto the neck part, because then we've got a gapy front and it's too long. But we do want to add extra height onto the shoulder part to give it movement and to give it drape, because that's part of the design on the top. So that's the stitch marker kind of goes from the apex up, and it naturally indicates where the neck base is roughly. So it's a good sort of suggestion to keep the stitch marker in place, just so that you've got a guide of where your wedge is going to rapidly increase for the sleeve if you're following the Emily pattern. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to work on is the wedge treatment. I'll work a few more rows of this first, and then in fact I'll just work the wedge just now to kind of show you. Okay, so when we're working the wedge, you would have a few more rows here first, but when we're working the wedge, we're going to start always at the sleeve end. It's going to have a extended link double crochet, and always at the neck end is going to be where the single crochets and slip stitches or no stitches are. So depending on your size, the pattern tells you how many of each stitch to do. So I'm just going to wing it with this one, because my pattern doesn't have a teddy bear size. So I'll do a series of a couple of, oh, it keeps falling out. So how many have I got there? 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do 4. Right, so I'll do 5 actually. Okay, so for the next part here, we want the wedge to basically sort of go up like a triangle wing sort of shape, not too much though. So here I'm going to choose a shorter stitch. So I'm going to still do a linked stitch, but this time I'm not going to do an extended linked double crochet. I'm just going to do a linked double crochet, so I don't do the chain part at the start, and I'll do that for a couple of stitches, and that gives me a graduated height difference. And then from then I am going to do a half double crochet, few stitches, so half double crochet, and then to give you a little decrease here, what I do here is I do 2 single crochets together, which look like a very similar to a half double crochet, but it gives you a reduction just before your single crochets. And then I'll put a single crochet in, just brings it in nicely, and then a slip stitch at the end. Now remember, we would have more reductions here if this was a human garment. This is just to show you. So at the end I'm going to chain 1 and turn, and then I'm going to skip the first one. That's another reduction that you've made, and then single crochet for a couple, and then this time we're building the height up the way, so I'll do a half double. No reductions on this one, just on the way back. And try and link your half double to your double crochet just in the end one, and then the tallest stitch for the next one. Now the pattern also has a short row, so short rows are great for adding darts, wedges of fullness, reducing wedges of fullness on your contours of your garments. They're good for design and fit, so and they're not scary, I promise. You're just making a little wedge and you're just stopping early, so nothing scary, promise. Okay, so I'm at the end here. My next row is going to be a short row. Let me show you what that means now. As I said before, there's the apex. I should have kept my stitch marker in, so let me just pretend I did. Where did we go? Let's see, it was there. Okay, you're going to be more diligent than I am. So here is where my stitch marker is, so there's my apex zone, and there's my shoulder. That's going to be my shoulder. What I'm going to do is work my height differences. I'm going to stop here. So biggest at the sleeve. Just follow the pattern numbers and rows and instructions for extra details. And oops. So I'm now switching to a linked double crochet now for a few. Now I'm switching to a half double. Now I'm switching to a single crochet. You could do a single crochet 2 together if you're finding you need to. Maybe you've got too many stitches and you'd like to tighten it. And then where the stitch marker was, which is this one, you put a slip stitch and then stop. Don't work anymore. Leave these, forget about them just now. Chain 1. We're now in the next row. This is the second short row. Can you see the angle change because of that short row? So instead of it going, you know, like that, we're not adding anything to here. Gives it a nice sort of v-neck sweetheart shoulder edge, and then it's winging up this way, and it's going to get even better when we do the second short row. So we chained one here, we're going to skip one and single crochet. I'm going to single crochet a couple. It's good to vary by a 1 or 2 stitches so that you're not always stacking the same stitch height on top of each other, or you'll end up with steps. So just try and balance them out a wee bit if you can. And then I'm graduating my height difference again up to the top. And then after this, the pair of short rows, you go back to a long row again. So where you left off, you work right through that. And I'll show you that one. Oops. Got 2 stitches left on this row. Always maintain the clean edge of the sleeve. So don't increase or decrease at the sleeve end. Okay, so if I show you now, can you see it naturally makes this lovely fluted shape? And now what we're going to do is we're going to work all the way down to the end, again maintaining our height differences. So again, in the pattern it tells you how many of each type of stitch to work according to your size, so just check and refer to that. But there is an alteration section if you need to make a little tweak, because not all bodies are the same size or shape, and so nobody fits perfectly into one size completely without any tweaking. So I would just double check that, and if you notice if you know parts of your body, then make the change. I'm just going to pull out a few. I think I've got too many of the same height. We don't want a big step, so I'm just going to change into a linked double crochet height. Now when I come to this part, I'll talk to you about it. This should be where the stitch marker is. Let me put it in and pretend it was there again. And my half double crochets here. At the stitch marker point, so that's the pivot point, that was where our short row was, so we've worked 2 extra rows in there, and you can tell because it's just kind of got a little hole there, it's been pulled a little bit. So what you can do there is you can work across it, skip over the sort of chain part that's been created from the turn like that, and you can actually work 2 single crochets together, and that kind of tightens it up for you. And then in the last one, put a slip stitch, and that's how we work the sleeve portion. What I would then do is a final row of half double crochets all the way along the top, or you could also do extended, sorry, a linked double crochets. I wouldn't do an extended one because that'll be a bit too high, but if you, depends on how much room you're wanting here, this is really just a stabilizing row so that you have, so I'm not going to go into the first one, and then I'll work my half double crochets all the way along just to give the edge a nice clean edge to seam on at the end. Now you could even leave the edges raw, as in you don't need to make any edging onto here or onto the neckline if you really didn't want to, but the pattern does have an edging on it, so quite good for hiding if you have. Now if you've got a little bit of lumps and bumps for here, when it comes to this point where it's evening out from the extra rows that were inserted in this point, you can, if you're finding it's kind of pulling a little, you can put in 2 stitches into this one just to kind of bring it flat, just if you notice if it's curving, or you know, bumpling up, then you can do that. Just one though, don't go mad. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. When I get a moment, I will finish the teddy bear Tom Rainbow's beautiful Emily top. I should have really got a bag puss one, in case you didn't guess the name. Emily comes from the little girl that owned Bag Puss, which was a little teddy cat that was pink and cream striped like the original sample that I made. So I'll put a little picture so you can admire it. So yeah, so that's basically how it's working, and then we will seam here and the back would be added. Now the back's not made in 2 parts because the back's a high neck, so this section is actually worked a bit like a bow tie or a butterfly, as in it'll be worked along, and then the sleeves are worked in one big long row, and then you would increase, decrease, 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 increase, 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 kind of like that. That's the main difference between the front and the back. Anyway, hope this helps. Hopefully you give it a go. Let me know how you get on. Check out the pattern, check out all of the socials and everything. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on any updates or any more tutorial videos, and I would really love to hear from you. So there's at the end of the video there'll be other videos that you can check out, so make sure you check them out too. Anyway, from Tom and I, bye lovely.